I never imagined that cleaning out my attic would change everything I believed about my family. While moving old boxes, I found one covered in dust, pushed behind a trunk. On the lid, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "For her eyes only." Inside was a letter from my late mother, Margaret, and in that letter, I uncovered a secret she had kept hidden for her entire life. A secret that would shake me to my core. Before I tell you what I discovered, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 62 years old, a grandmother, and a widow. My daughter Clara has been asking me for months to move closer to her so she can help me more easily. She's practical, always reminding me, "Mom, you don't need all this stuff. Let's make your life lighter." So, on a warm Saturday morning, I decided it was finally time to clear out my attic. That attic held decades of my life. Boxes of my late husband's belongings, shelves of family photo albums, and furniture that hadn't been touched in years. As I climbed the wooden stairs, the air felt heavy, carrying the scent of old paper and dust. Shafts of sunlight cut through the small window, illuminating the piles stacked high around me. Each box I opened pulled me back into memories. My wedding dress, yellowed with time. My children's baby clothes, folded neatly but long forgotten. Even my father's tool, still rusted from years of use. Every item seemed to whisper pieces of my past, and each one made it harder to let go. Clara came up the stairs, brushing dust from her jeans. "Mom, this is going to take forever if you keep getting lost in memories." She smiled gently, but I could tell she was serious. I sighed. "These memories are my life, Clara. It's not easy to throw them away." She wrapped her arm around my shoulder. "I know, but you don't have to carry them all alone anymore." That's when I spotted it. Behind an old trunk, tucked away like it wasn't meant to be found, sat a small wooden box. It was coated in thick dust, its edges worn smooth by time. I pulled it forward, and when I wiped the surface with my hand, my heart stopped. The handwriting was so familiar, it almost felt alive. On the lid, in my mother's careful script, were the words, "For her eyes only." Clara leaned closer. "What is it? Another photo box?" My hands shook as I held it. "No, this is from your grandmother, and I don't know why she never told me about it." At that moment, I knew this box was different. It wasn't just old belongings. It was a message from the grave, a secret my mother had carried to her last breath, and I was about to open it. I carried the wooden box down from the attic as if it were made of glass. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to open it. My mother, Margaret, had passed away 15 years ago. She was a strong, reserved woman who never spoke much about her past. She raised me with discipline, but she also had a way of showing love in small, quiet ways. An extra slice of pie after dinner, a hand on my shoulder when I cried, a whispered prayer when she thought no one was listening. To see her handwriting again after all these years felt like hearing her voice echoing through time. Clara followed me to the kitchen table, curious. "Mom, what's inside? Do you think it's something valuable?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "I don't know, but this box, it feels important. Look at the words she wrote. For her eyes only. That means it was meant for me." Clara placed her hand over mine. "Then maybe you should open it. I'll sit with you." Her presence gave me courage. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of old photographs, a brooch I recognized from my mother's jewelry box, and a sealed envelope addressed in her familiar hand. To my daughter, Evelyn. The sight of my name written by her hand made my throat tighten. I picked up the envelope carefully, as though opening it too quickly might shatter the moment. The paper was yellowed with age, but the seal had never been broken. Clara watched quietly as I slipped a finger under the flap and unfolded the letter. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears, but I forced myself to read. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are holding this letter, it means my time in this world has passed, and you are finally ready to learn the truth I could never bring myself to tell you. Before I met your father, I fell in love with someone else. That love gave me my first child, a daughter. Circumstances beyond my control forced me to give her up. I carried that pain with me every day, and I raised you while keeping this secret locked away. I was afraid of judgment, afraid of breaking the family we built, but you deserve to know the truth. You have a sister. I stopped reading, my hands trembling so badly that Clara had to steady the paper. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. A sister? My mother had another child? My voice cracked as I whispered, "Why didn't she tell me?" Clara leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "Mom, this changes everything. Do you think it's true?" The letter continued with details. A name, Helen Parker, and the city where she was born. My mother wrote about how young and frightened she had been, how society in those days would have never forgiven her, how she made the agonizing choice to let her child be raised by another family. She begged me not to judge her too harshly, but to understand that she wanted to protect me, to protect all of us. Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. I had always thought of my mother as cold, even distant at times. But now I realized she had been carrying a wound I never saw, a wound she never allowed to heal. Clara reached for my hand. "Mom, are you okay?" I shook my head, struggling to find the words. All these years, I thought I knew who my mother was. I thought I understood her. But she was living with this secret the whole time, and she wanted me to know now after she was gone. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Grief, anger, confusion, but also a strange sense of longing. If my mother was telling the truth, then somewhere out there, I had a sister, someone who shared my blood, someone I had never met. Clara spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "What are you going to do? Are you going to try to find her?" Her question hung in the air like a heavy weight. I didn't know the answer. A part of me wanted to close the box and pretend I had never opened it, pretend my life was the same as it had always been. But another part of me, stronger and louder, was burning with curiosity and need. If my mother had trusted me with this truth, how could I ignore it? I stared down at the letter, running my fingers over the ink, as though by touching her words, I could feel her presence again. My mother had hidden this from me for decades, but she had also chosen me to carry it forward. She wanted me to know, to decide what to do next. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Questions spun in my mind, refusing to rest. Who was Helen Parker? Did she know about me? Did she wonder about the family she never met? Did she ever search for us? And if I found her, would she even want to know me? I felt the sharp sting of betrayal, but alongside it, I felt an ache of longing. My mother's secret had shattered the picture I had of my family, but it had also opened a door I never knew existed. The choice was mine now, to step through it, or to close it forever. And as I lay there in the silence of my home, I knew this was only the beginning. The days after finding the letter were some of the hardest I can remember. I carried it with me from room to room, unable to set it down for long. Each time I reread my mother's words, I noticed something new, a turn of phrase, a plea for forgiveness, the quiet pain that seeped through every line. She had carried this secret her whole life, and now it was mine to carry. But unlike her, I had a choice. I could bury it again, or I could face it. At first I told myself that maybe Clara was right. Maybe the past should stay in the past. After all, my mother had her reasons for hiding the truth. She had lived in a time when a single mistake could ruin a woman's reputation forever. I tried to convince myself that honoring her meant leaving her secret untouched. But every time I thought about it, my chest tightened, as if a voice inside me whispered that I was turning my back on the truth. One evening, Clara came over with my grandson, Sam. We were sitting at the kitchen table when she brought it up again. "Mom, you've been distant all week. Still thinking about the letter?" she asked. I nodded. I can't stop. Every time I close my eyes, I see her handwriting. I hear her voice telling me I have a sister out there. Sam, ever curious, looked up from his homework. "Wait, you have a sister? Does that mean I have another grandma?" Clara gave him a sharp look, but I couldn't help but smile through the heaviness. "Not exactly, sweetheart, but maybe you have another great aunt." Sam's innocent question cut through my fear. I realized this wasn't just about me. This was about my daughter, my grandson, and the generations to come. Family is the thread that weaves us together, and if I had more family out there, I needed to know them. That night, after Clara and Sam left, I sat alone with the letter spread out on the table. I whispered aloud, as though speaking to my mother. You wanted me to know this, Mama. You left me the clues. You wanted me to find her, didn't you? For the first time since opening the box, I felt something other than confusion and grief. I felt determination. I would search for Helen Parker. I owed it to my mother, to myself, and to the sister I never knew. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at my computer, and typed in the name my mother had written. Helen Parker, born in 1959, New York City. Dozens of results flooded the screen. Obituaries, social media profiles, public records. The name was too common, and the trail felt overwhelming. Still, I refused to give up. I started making phone calls. I contacted an old cousin of my mother's who still lived in her hometown. At first, she hesitated to speak about the past, but when I explained what I had found, her tone softened. Your mother did mention a baby once, she admitted quietly, but no one knew what happened after. We thought it was just a rumor. That confirmation was enough to push me further. I pulled out every detail from the letter, dates, addresses, even the hospital name scribbled faintly at the bottom. Piece by piece, I began to trace a path, like following a map drawn in faded ink. Clara wasn't happy about it. She came over again, watching me shuffle through papers and online searches. Mom, you're obsessing. What if this woman doesn't want to be found? What if she resents you for showing up in her life after all these years? I looked her in the eyes and spoke with a firmness that surprised even me. Clara, I can't live the rest of my life wondering. If she doesn't want to meet me, I'll respect that. But I have to try. Clara sighed, rubbing her forehead. You sound just like Grandma, stubborn. I laughed softly. Maybe that's where I get it from. As the weeks passed, my search became a quiet mission. Late at night, when the house was silent, I scrolled through genealogy websites and public archives. During the day, I reached out to adoption agencies, explaining my situation, hoping someone would have a record or a lead. Each dead end frustrated me, but each small discovery kept me going. One evening, after nearly giving up, I came across a record that made my heart stop. A Helen Parker, born the exact year and city my mother had written. The record listed her current residence only 2 towns away from mine. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, my heart racing. I printed the information and held it tightly in my hands. This was it. After weeks of searching, I had found her, but fear crept in just as quickly as hope. What if she didn't want me? What if meeting me only reopened wounds she had spent her whole life trying to heal? I sat at the table staring at the paper when Clara walked in. She saw the look on my face and asked, "Did you find her?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, she's close, very close." Clara sat down across from me, her expression torn between worry and curiosity. "So what now?" I took a deep breath. "Now, I have to decide if I'm brave enough to meet her." In that moment, I knew the turning point had come. The past was no longer just words on a letter. It was alive, breathing, waiting just beyond my reach. And it was up to me whether to walk away or to take the step my mother couldn't. The night before I decided to meet her, I barely slept. My mind raced through every possibility. I imagined her slamming the door in my face, accusing me of digging up a past she never wanted to relive. I imagined her breaking down in tears, overwhelmed that someone had finally found her. But the thought that kept me awake the most was simple. What if she had spent her entire life wondering who I was? Just like I was now wondering about her. By morning, I knew I couldn't hide from the truth any longer. I called the cafe listed near the address I had found and arranged to meet Helen Parker there. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. For 62 years, I had lived believing I was an only child. In a matter of hours, that belief would either be confirmed or destroyed forever. Clara insisted on coming with me. She didn't want me to face it alone. "If this turns out to be too much, you'll need someone to lean on," she said, squeezing my hand. Sam begged to come too, but I told him this was something I needed to do with his mother first. He looked disappointed, but then he hugged me and whispered, "Good luck, Grandma. Tell me what she's like." The drive to the cafe felt like moving through a dream. Every streetlight, every tree we passed seemed sharper, as if the world knew what was about to happen. When we finally pulled into the small parking lot, my stomach tightened. Through the cafe's front window, I saw her, a woman with silver-streaked hair neatly pinned back, sitting at a corner table. She wore a navy blue sweater, her posture straight, her hands folded around a mug of coffee. And then I saw her face. My breath caught. Even from across the room, I recognized her eyes. They were my mother's eyes, soft gray with a faint sadness, the kind that told a story all on its own. For a moment, I couldn't move. Clara touched my arm gently. "That's her, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yes, that's her." Walking into the cafe felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. Each step toward her was heavy with fear and hope. When I reached the table, she looked up. Our eyes met, and time seemed to stop. "Are you Evelyn?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She stood slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "You look so much like our mother." At that, something inside me broke. All the anger, all the confusion I had been carrying dissolved into pure emotion. I reached for her hands. "And you're real. I can't believe I finally found you." We sat together, staring at each other, both overwhelmed by the moment. It felt like looking into a mirror of what could have been, a life where we had grown up together, shared secrets, fought over clothes, celebrated birthdays side by side. Instead, decades of silence had separated us. Helen took a deep breath. I always knew I was adopted. My parents were kind, but they could never answer the questions that haunted me. Who was my real mother? Did she love me? Did I have brothers or sisters out there? I never got answers. And then you appeared. I squeezed her hand tightly. She loved you. She loved you more than you will ever know. She wrote it in her letter. She said giving you up was the hardest thing she ever did. She wasn't abandoning you. She was protecting you in the only way she thought she could. Tears spilled down Helen's cheeks. "All these years, I thought I wasn't wanted, but you're telling me I was loved?" I nodded, my own tears falling freely. "Yes, you were loved." She carried that pain every single day, and now I carry her words to you. For the first time, Helen smiled. A smile that looked so achingly familiar I had to catch my breath. Then maybe I didn't lose her entirely. Maybe through you, I can know a part of her. Clara, who had been watching quietly, leaned forward. "You don't just know a part of her. You know us too. This family is yours if you want it." Helen reached across the table and took Clara's hand as well. In that small cafe, 3 generations connected in a way I never thought possible. My mother's secret had felt like a betrayal at first, but sitting there with Helen, I realized it was something else entirely. It was a sacrifice made out of love, a painful choice she believed was the only way forward. The cafe around us faded into the background as we spoke for hours. We exchanged stories, filled in missing pieces of our lives, and shared memories of a woman who had shaped us both in different ways. When we finally stood to leave, Helen whispered, "I lost a mother the day she gave me away, but today I feel like I gained a sister." Her words echoed in my heart. For the first time since finding that letter, I felt peace. The truth hadn't destroyed me. It had given me something I never knew I needed. As we walked out together, hand in hand, I realized that the past didn't have to be a chain. It could also be a bridge, connecting us, healing us, and reminding us that even the deepest secrets can lead to the most unexpected forms of love. The drive home from the cafe that day felt different from any other in my life. My chest, once tight with anxiety, now felt light, almost free. I had walked into that cafe terrified of rejection, terrified of the unknown, but I walked out with something I never imagined. My sister. For 62 years, I had carried the belief that I was alone, the only child of Margaret Carter. Now, that belief had been rewritten. The story of my family wasn't smaller than I thought. It was bigger, fuller, and more complicated. In the weeks that followed, Helen and I began to weave each other into our lives. At first, our conversations were careful, like 2 people tiptoeing across fragile ice, afraid to break it. But little by little, the ice melted. We talked about childhood memories, about the mothers who raised us, about our struggles and joys. I told her about my late husband, about raising Clara, about Sam's boundless curiosity. She told me about her adoptive parents, who had loved her deeply, and about the emptiness she sometimes felt, not knowing where she came from. One evening, she came over for dinner. Clara set the table, and Sam ran circles around the living room, bubbling with excitement to meet his new aunt. When Helen walked in, Sam ran right up to her and asked with all the innocence of a 12-year-old, "So does this mean you're part of my family now?" Helen knelt down, her eyes shining. "If you'll have me, then yes. I'd love to be part of your family." Clara, who had been cautious at first, began to open her heart as well. She saw how much Helen meant to me, and how our connection was already changing the way I carried myself. "Mom," she said one night after Helen left, "I was scared this would hurt you, but I can see now. It's healing you." She was right. The truth that once felt like it would break me was instead stitching my heart back together in ways I didn't think possible. For years, I had carried complicated feelings about my mother: respect, love, but also resentment for her strictness and distance. Now, I finally understood her. She wasn't cold. She was protecting a wound too deep to show. She had given up her first child not out of abandonment, but out of desperation and fear of a world that wouldn't forgive her. And yet, she had loved us both. Helen in silence, me in presence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that her decision, though painful, had led us exactly here. If she hadn't made that choice, Helen and I might not have lived the lives we did, with the families we had. It wasn't betrayal, it was sacrifice. And in that sacrifice, she gave us the chance to find each other now, when we were ready to truly understand. The holidays came, and for the first time in my life, I had a sister at my table. We cooked together, laughed together, and even argued over recipes like we had been doing it all our lives. At one point, as we stood side by side washing dishes, Helen looked at me and said, "Do you realize how much Mom would love this moment? She'd finally see her daughters together." Her words brought tears to my eyes. But they were no longer tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to rewrite the ending of a story that began long before I understood it. I often sit and reflect on how fragile family can be, how secrets can stretch across generations like shadows. For a long time, I thought uncovering my mother's secret would destroy my picture of her. Instead, it expanded it. I see her now as a whole person, flawed, human, but also deeply loving. And through that, I learned that sometimes the truth doesn't weaken a family, it strengthens it. Now, when I look at Clara and Sam, I feel a deeper sense of responsibility. I want them to know that family isn't just about the stories we're told. It's also about the courage to uncover the stories we aren't. And it's about embracing the people we find along the way, even if they come to us later than expected. Helen and I still meet every week. Sometimes we laugh until our sides hurt. Other times we sit in silence, simply grateful to be in each other's company. Every time I see her, I think about the wooden box in the attic, about the words, "For her eyes only." I realize now that my mother wasn't just leaving me a secret. She was leaving me a gift, a chance to know the sister I never had, a chance to heal the wound she could never heal herself. And as I close this chapter of my story, I can say this with certainty. The truth changed my family forever, but in the best possible way. What began with a dusty box in the attic ended with laughter, forgiveness, and love. So if you're watching this, remember, sometimes the secrets we fear the most are the ones that lead us to the people and lessons we need the most. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too.